Today we will be looking at the recent Maldives cave diving tragedy that happened on Thursday, May 14th, 2026, and went horribly wrong. 5 Italian divers entered the water near Alimatha in Va'avu Atoll. They were supposed to return before the day was over, but the first search did not bring back 5 people. It brought back only 1. The others were still somewhere below, inside an underwater cave that rescuers could not simply rush into. And over the next few days, the search itself would become so dangerous that another diver would lose his life trying to bring them back. The story is still developing. As always, viewer discretion is advised. The Maldives is usually shown as paradise. Clear blue water, white sand, warm lagoons, and coral reefs sitting under the sun. From above, Va'avu Atoll looks peaceful in the way only the Maldives can look peaceful. But beneath that calm surface, the reef does not stay flat forever. It drops away. It folds into darker sections. It opens into channels, overhangs, and hidden spaces where the water is no longer open in every direction. And once a diver leaves open water and moves under a ceiling, everything changes. The surface may still be close somewhere above, but it is no longer reachable by simply swimming upward. The only way back is the way they came in. On Thursday, May 14th, the group of Italian divers was in the Alimatha area. They were identified in reports as Monica Montefalcone, her daughter Giorgia Somacal, Muriel Audanino, Federico Gualtieri, and Gianluca Benedetti. Some of them were connected to marine science, research, and diving, which makes the story even more unsettling because this was not a group of people who had never been around the ocean before. They understood the sea, they understood reefs, they understood that diving carries risk. But an underwater cave is not just another dive site. It is a place where the rules become stricter the moment the diver goes inside. The dive began like countless dives begin in the Maldives. The boat stayed above. The divers entered the water. The reef disappeared below them. From the surface, the first few minutes may have looked ordinary because nothing about a calm ocean tells you what is happening underneath it. As they descended, the bright Maldives water changed around them, and somewhere below, the dive was moving towards a cave. That cave sits 50 meters deep. At that depth, the dive is already serious before the cave is even considered. A diver is breathing through gas faster. Time matters more. The body is under pressure. The return to the surface cannot be treated casually. But the cave made the situation much more dangerous, because now the group did not just have to come up. They first had to come out. The cave system was described as 3 chambers connected by narrow passages. That kind of layout can feel deceptive. A chamber can give a diver space. It can make the dive feel controlled. But the passage into that chamber becomes the thing that matters most, because once the diver goes through it, that same passage is now the way back. On the way out, after time has passed, after gas has been used, after stress has built, and after visibility may have changed, that same passage can feel completely different. At some point, the group did not return. At first, a late return does not always mean disaster. A dive can run long. A group can take longer at decompression stops. Current can move divers away from the boat. Sometimes the first sign that divers are safe is not the divers themselves, but a marker buoy rising somewhere in the distance. So, the people above waited and watched the water. They looked for bubbles. They looked for a buoy. They looked for movement. They looked for anything that meant the group was still below, still together, and still making its way back. But the water stayed empty. And the longer it stayed empty, the more the situation changed. This was no longer just a delayed dive. 5 people were still missing beneath the surface, and the last known area was not a wide open reef. It was near an underwater cave. Search teams began preparing to go down. This was the first point where the rescue became much more complicated. If the divers had drifted away in open water, the search could spread across the reef and surrounding sea. But if they had entered the cave, the search was no longer wide. It was narrow. It was deep. and it meant sending people toward the same place where the group had disappeared. The first searchers descended toward the cave area. Above them, the Maldives still looked calm, but below, the search was closing in on a darker opening in the reef. This was no longer just a landmark. It was the line between open water and the place where the divers may have vanished. The searchers could not rush. They moved toward the entrance. Then, near the mouth of the cave, they found a body. It was Gianluca Benedetti. He was the first of the 5 to be recovered, but finding him did not end the emergency. It made the picture darker, because Gianluca was only one diver. Monica Montefalcone, Giorgia Somacal, Muriel Odenino, and Federico Gualtieri were still missing. And if Gianluca had been found near the entrance while the others were nowhere in open water, then the most frightening possibility became harder to ignore. The remaining 4 were believed to be somewhere beyond the entrance, deeper inside the cave. From that moment, the operation changed. The cave entrance was no longer just the place where one body had been found. It became the starting point of a much more dangerous recovery. The first task was to understand the entrance and mark the area. Teams had to know where the route began, how deep the access point was, how far they could safely go, and how much time each diver had before the dive itself became dangerous. So the operation moved in attempts. A team would descend, check what it could, then come back. The surface team would reassess. Then another attempt would be prepared. Each dive pushed the search slightly forward, but each dive also carried risk because the cave was not giving them a simple path to the missing divers. Among the men involved in the recovery effort was Mohammed Mehudi, a military diver with the Maldives National Defense Force. He was not part of the Italian group. He had not gone into the cave for exploration. He entered the story after the disaster had already happened, when the mission had shifted from waiting for missing divers to trying to reach people believed to be trapped or lost inside a deep underwater cave. By then, everyone involved understood what kind of operation this had become. There was one confirmed body. 4 people were still missing. The cave entrance was a depth. The system continued beyond it, and every decision had to balance 2 things at once: the need to bring the victims back and the need to keep the recovery divers alive. Mohammed was directly involved as the recovery plan developed. Reports said he was among those who briefed President Mohamed Muizu when the president visited the search site. So, before his final dive, Mohammed was already part of the effort to understand the cave, the danger, and the next steps. Then the search continued. Mohammed went down as part of that mission, and during the operation, the danger followed him back. Mohammed suffered decompression sickness. In deep diving, the risk does not always end when the diver leaves the deepest point. It can follow the diver during the ascent and after the dive. Under pressure, gases dissolve into the body. If the dive is too deep, too long, too severe, or the ascent cannot release that pressure safely, bubbles can form inside the body. That is decompression sickness. It can affect the joints, the lungs, the spinal cord, or the brain. In severe cases, it can become fatal. Mohammed was taken to a hospital in Malé, but he did not survive. After Mohammed's death, the recovery had to stop. Not because the missing divers no longer mattered, but because the cave had now shown its danger twice. First, 5 Italian divers had gone in and failed to return. Then one of the men sent in after them had died during the recovery effort. At that point, the question was no longer only where the missing divers were. The question was how anyone could enter that same place again without adding another name to the tragedy. From the outside, stopping can feel unbearable. Families are waiting. 4 bodies are still believed to be inside. People want answers. But underwater, emotion does not change the rules. If the teams kept pushing without a safer plan, the cave could take more lives. That is why specialist help was needed. 3 Finnish cave diving specialists arrived in the Maldives to help plan a safer recovery strategy. Their job was not simply to dive faster or push harder. It was to rebuild the operation around the cave itself. By this point, The recovery was no longer just about courage. Courage had already been shown. Mohammed had gone down after the missing divers and lost his life. The next step required something else: exact planning, controlled movement, and a careful approach to a cave that had already killed 6 people. The Finnish specialists prepared for the next phase. On Monday, May 18th, the search resumed with the Finnish specialists involved. This time, the operation was not about rushing. It was about moving through the cave carefully enough to avoid creating another tragedy. The divers had to work with the limits of the depth, the route, the gas, and the time they could safely spend underwater. Every move had to be controlled because by now, everyone knew what this cave could do. During that operation, the team finally located the remaining 4 bodies: Monica Monefalcone, Georgia Somacal, Muriel Audenino, Federico Gualtieri. For the families, this was the first real answer after days of uncertainty. They had been located. The other 4 were deep inside the cave system, specifically in the 3rd and largest segment of the cave, within the same roughly 200-foot-long cave structure. No official report has confirmed the exact moment where the original dive became fatal. So, the honest way to tell this story is not to pretend we know the final answer. The honest way is to follow the known timeline first, then look at the possible ways a dive like this can become unsurvivable. Based on what has been reported so far, there are 6 plausible scenarios. The first possibility is gas. At around 50 meters, a diver's tank does not last the way it would in shallow water. Every breath costs more. And inside a cave, the gas is not just for going down and coming up. It is for the way back out. That means if the group went farther than expected, stayed longer than planned, or if one diver began breathing harder under stress, the safety margin could have started disappearing while they were still inside. Once gas becomes a problem in a cave, the diver is not only trying to survive the moment, they are racing the entire route. They still have to find the passage, move through it, reach open water, and then ascend safely. Low gas in open water is terrifying. Low gas inside a deep cave is much worse because the surface may be above, but the exit is still behind. The second possibility is visibility. A cave can be clear on the way in and almost blind on the way out. One fin kick can lift sediment. One hand against the wall can cloud the water. Several divers moving through a narrow section can turn a clean route into a haze. When that happens, the light does not always help. It can reflect back into the diver's face. The chamber becomes a blur. The passage disappears. The exit may still be close, but close means nothing if no one can see the way back. And if a diver loses contact with the route or cannot find the correct passage in time, the cave becomes a maze with a clock running down. The third possibility is navigation. A cave can feel understandable when a team is moving inward. The shapes are new, the route feels obvious, and the divers are calm. But on the way out, everything is reversed. A turn that looked clear earlier may not look the same from the other direction. A chamber may have more than one dark opening. A passage may blend into the rock. If the group took the wrong opening, even briefly, that mistake could have moved them deeper instead of closer to open water. At shallow depth, a wrong turn can sometimes be corrected. At 50 meters, every wrong turn costs time, gas, and calm. The fourth possibility is narcosis. At deeper depths, the mind can slow down without the diver fully understanding what is happening. A person may not feel terrified. They may not feel like they are losing control. They may simply think slower, react later, or feel strangely calm when the situation actually demands urgency. That is what makes narcosis dangerous. A gas reading can be noticed late. A turnaround decision can be delayed. A small problem can be treated like something that can wait. But inside a cave, a few minutes can change everything because every delay happens under pressure, away from the surface, and inside a route that must still be exited. The fifth possibility is a restriction. The cave was described as having chambers connected by narrow passages. and those narrow sections may have been where the danger became unavoidable. A diver can pass through a tight opening once and assume they can return through it, but the return is not the same. By then, the diver may be tired, their tank may be lower, their breathing may be faster, visibility may be worse. Another diver may be in the same passage. Equipment can catch. A body can turn at the wrong angle. And if one person gets delayed in a narrow section, the entire team can be affected. In a cave, one diver's problem can become everyone's problem because the exit is shared. The sixth possibility is the most frightening because it may not have been one single mistake. Many cave tragedies are built from a chain. The dive goes a little deeper, the group stays a little longer, gas is used a little faster, the route becomes a little less clear, visibility gets worse, someone hesitates, someone turns the wrong way, someone breathes harder, a restriction takes longer than expected. Then the margin disappears one piece at a time. By the time the danger becomes obvious, the divers are still inside the cave, still under pressure, still unable to go straight up, and the safe exit window has already closed. That is why this tragedy cannot be reduced to one simple answer yet. The investigation may eventually show what mattered most. The story is still developing. In the days after the incident, the Maldives will still look the same from above. Boats will still move across the water. The ocean will still have the same bright blue color that makes people think of safety, calm, and escape. But beneath that surface, 5 Italian divers had entered a cave and never returned alive.